Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good. I'm really honored to be here today to present some of my findings in this dissertation. I'm still wondering why I am first. All my life, I have always been last. And because my name naturally is W, so I'm always in the back of the line. But for some reason, I am first. And so thank you so much to Dean Colloquium and to Dr. Sakura. Congratulations. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing happening right now. And I am just so thankful, and to my classmates who we graduate together, and my classmates throughout, and those who are coming in or thinking about coming in, and to my professors, and to each and every one of you and my colleagues. I just greet you again, and it's just a pleasure and an honor to present this presentation. So I want to just get right in and talk to you today. I feel like this is yet again a defense. And so I'm gonna tell you how I feel right now. Scared. And I haven't felt this way since I preached my trial sermon. But after that, it was in my first and second proposal and defense, and now I'm back at it again. So God be with us all. Amen. And so I just want to read the book of Matthew for a moment. And I would like to just read this scripture from Matthew chapter 25, verse 35 and 36. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visit me. I was in prison, and you came, and you visit me. This picture is the historic Parcel Church. That is the actual church, located in Rochester in the Beechwood section, which is the northeast section of the city. In the northeast section of the city, it is considered the most impoverished part of the entire city. That part of the community has brought down the entire city, making Rochester the 5th poorest city in the United States of America. And it is because of that region that, in addition to some of our manufacturing companies, Bachelam, Xerox, Kodak, coupled with that, plus with the concentration, where a concentration of poverty has existed in the Northeast, has created a major, major problem for the city and the churches that are there. So this is the historic Parcel Church, and because of that, I wanted it to talk about urban poverty, and that is the title. The actual scholarly word was the insidious nature of urban poverty and the progressive mission of the neighborhood church. But I wanted to downscale it for our hearing today because there's also practitioners, and I want everyone to understand. So it's the urban poverty and the role of the church. As part of an overview look of what I did in terms of discovery and in terms of the presentation, I wanted to address the stubborn nature of poverty. And I want to say this, that I believe that it's very, very important to note that although the church did not and is not responsible for the creation and sustainment of poverty, yet I argue that it is the responsibility of the church to help reduce concentration of poverty. And so as part of that, we are here to recover and I'm not, part of the contribution of this discussion is that I'm not offering anything new other than let's go back yonder. Let's go back yonder. Let's go back to the book of Acts, chapter 2, as part of the paradigm of the creation of a neighborhood parish. And that neighborhood parish becoming the central institution or the hub of community life within that community. So the purpose of this project is to study that. And why is it that there is a social isolation of the urban poor from inner city congregations and the neighborhood church abandonment of the historical and biblical imperative that which the church once upon a time proudly boasts? There's a separation. And at this point, we are noticing that the church is not talking to the community, and the community is not talking to the church. And so as a result of that, and what I like to continue to do is, and it says recovery, but I'm sorry, it should be recovering the mission of the neighborhood church. That was missing, sorry. I'm just bringing out suggestions that something is either lost or need replacement. And missional recovery requires treatment, thinking about and touching upon, rethinking the social gospel of the church and the way we approach and address the effect of concentrated poverty. Now, I want to make this clear that as part of the problem is that we have a concentration where this particular Northeast area, all or most of the poverty is within that region, making it very difficult to separate it or move it, or not, I wouldn't say spread it out, but to try to reduce that stubbornness and get it out of here. And so why I became interested and the passion behind it, well, just as a personal vignette, I was poor. I grew up in the ever heard of Fort Apache, South Bronx? That's me. When we went and decided to take a walk back in the 70s, it was actually to take a run. And so we ran as part of our walk because that was Fort Apache. And so we grew up poor. We grew up not even knowing we were poor, but we were poor, where every other day I had to personally eat rice and milk. And if I wanted dessert, I put sugar on top of the rice and milk. And that was how we lived. That was how we lived. But all of that enabled me to realize that the way in which I got out of it, personally speaking, the way in which I got out was two institutions, education and the church. It was education and the church. So then my responsibility to this included the fact that when I went to school, that I had a love for urban ministry. And so my seminary career and everything, and all of the churches that I've served was in the urban community. And so here, I argue as part of the problem is to address that isolation. Why is it that we're not talking? Why is it that people see a church and just walk by it and vice versa? Why is it that when we come in and we park the car in the back of the church building, we walk right in and have no affairs with the community in which that church is located at? And so I want to offer as part of a proposal, like I shared, that I'm not offering anything new in the contribution of this discussion. What I want to go back is to return, to bring forth a return of the Acts 2 congregation. And to return back to Acts 2, 42 to 46, talking about how the community came together and the community cared for one another. The community spoke to one another. The community engaged with one another and did anything and everything with each other. So I want to offer that as part of a return to the historical and biblical imperative of a progressive-based ministry, offering even today that churches need to go into economic and community neighborhood development initiatives. And so as part of that, I raised 3 research questions. Those questions were my guide and guided me through the process of the dissertation project. The first question is, what is the historical relationship of the church to its surrounding neighborhood? The second is, what are the needs and or opportunities of the Beechwood area within Rochester? And lastly, given the various circumstances of poverty in the Rochester community, what ministry model would most effectively engage the needs of the neighborhood? So now, so at this point, I want to address what I did. And what I did not come with a basic one-style-fit-all in this dissertation in terms of research methodology. What I did was a mixed method research. So I did a little everything. And case study, qualitative, lit review, a little everything. And so as part of the research one, what is the historical relationship of the church to its surrounding neighborhood? Part of that method was a literature review. And, a literature review, as well as biblical and theological analysis. And I came from, again, the book of Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 46, but also I as you heard me, spoke from Matthew 25. As I was sick and you visit me, I was hungry and you gave me food. And so as part of my findings, we argued that one of the issues is that there was an abandonment. There is an abandonment of the struggle for suffrage, for something more pleasing with a lot of the churches. And that today, churches are more about fulfilling self-interest or inward needs, no longer engaging in community work or in dealing with the suffrage or the struggle for suffrage within the community. In that the church, number two, has become, in terms of the historical nature, we understand in the historical churches, they were missional in nature. But that has since shifted where we're now more institutional, where we're more dealing with denominational issues or dealing with other types of affairs in that regards. As well, part of that historical finding is that within the historical mission congregation, when, as we've discovered in reading the book of Acts and the book of Matthew, that congregations at that time, they advocated for each other. They advocated for members within their church or parish, and really dealt with the issue of assisting each other's needs and going from that perspective. And so at that particular point, question number 2 is, what are the needs and or opportunities within the Beechwood area? Now, as part of this study in terms of methodology, I did a demographic study as well as some form of qualitative data gathering. And I'll share that. In terms of the demographic studies, we needed to know more about Beechwood, and we needed to know more about the northeast area of the city. You heard me say that in Beechwood, it is the center is one of among the neighborhoods within the Northeast very poor. 34% of the of those who own homes are owner occupied. 34% are homeowners who own and occupy their homes currently living in Beechwood. And so there is over 66% of renters and transients. But how did we get there? Well, it was back in the riots when Rochester had the 1966 riots and the white flight occurred. And so that began the trend, that began the shift. And what occurred was that the city of Rochester decided at that time, maybe a few years later, to change the housing code. The housing code at that point was residential 1, R1. Which means that each home, you can only have one unit, one family could live in per building, per unit, per dwelling, and changed it to R2. R2 meant that it was multiple use and multiple units. That led to the decline. And so just recently, within the last 4 years, the Beechwood Neighborhood Association helped leading a campaign to reverse that trend, to bring it back to R1. So that we go back to each of the homes becoming a R1 designation. And so this began part of the trend in terms of the demographic and in that study, in that analysis. But at the same time, we also did something a little different in terms of qualitative gathering and data. The church needed to do a study of its residents. Are we talking? Are we not? But we didn't want to do an invasive study. So what we did, we decided to have some events and draw the community to the church. And we decided to do something very basic and simple. We had a block party. And the block party drew out over 1,000 people. And in the 1,000 people, the church gave away refrigerators, microwave ovens, gave away all kinds of goodies to draw the congregation and to draw the community out. And they did. Gave away all kinds of stuff, backpacks, hamburgers, hot dogs. And we set up a booth. And the booth had a lot of information, and that was where a lot of people started talking to the members of the church about the condition of the neighborhood and themselves. And so we gathered those information also from that particular perspective, in addition holding various forums. And so those forums outside the block party in November, October, that we really had and gathered those type of qualitative research. We found out as part of that discussion that a lot of the residents in Beechwood are not talking and do not have any interest in any of the churches in the Beechwood community, and saw no value in those churches, because those churches, and my church was one of them, did not communicate and had any relationship with the neighborhood, and vice versa. And so too, because that also occurred because of the fact that most churches today are commuter-based churches. And so everybody's coming in. And so therefore there's this disconnection. Let's go to number 3. Number 3, in terms of methodology, I use a combination of literature review, textual review, as well as experiential research based on my theological understanding of the nature of the neighborhood congregation, and I did a focused case study. And so question number 3 says, given the various circumstances of poverty in the Rochester community, what ministry model would most effectively engage the needs of the neighborhood? And so as part of that discovery, we needed to do a case study. This was really focused on a case study. What is out there? What other congregation that is out there currently doing what it is that we were thinking about and has already have done it? Well, we found one, but it's in Cleveland, Ohio. And so we managed to talk with the former pastor of the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, and that is the Reverend Dr. Marvin McMickle, president of Colgate Rochester Crozier here in Rochester, and spoke with him and several of his former members about what they did. Now, what's interesting about this case study, why we went there, was because that church was one of the first church in the country that engaged in HIV and AIDS back in the 80s, when no one wanted to touch it. When no one wanted to touch it, that church took daring, bold steps to address the AIDS epidemic, and they are now the #1 AIDS and HIV research center as well as clinic within the Fairfax community in Cleveland. And so we found that church. So as part of the constructive proposal, before I get to the proposal, what are the consequences that we've discovered as part of the consequence of the wider church? We argue that the church no longer influenced the neighborhood, that the congregations and community no longer speaks to each other. There's no engagement, there's no involvement, and I messed up, and more institutional, the churches are more institutional and less missional and purpose-centered. At the same time, proposal. So as part of the proposal, we wanted to do three things. The formation of 2 congregations to become one neighborhood parish. 2 years ago, I was asked to take 2 congregations and blend it into one new congregation. The church that I had was the Christ Community Church of Rochester, and then there was the Parcel Avenue Community Church. This was an opportunity to create that parish and to blend the 2, and my congregation was growing. Parcel died, and so the only prized possession they had was the building. And so we decided to take the 2 congregations, take the building, redesign it, and making it and immerse it in the neighborhood parish concept. And so as part of that process, we created the 4-word mission, to bless the world. And to bless the world, the bless is an acronym. Begin with prayer, L for listen, E for eat. You gotta eat. S for share our story, and the following is to serve. Returning the church to a neighborhood parish. But as part of that, how do we make the people speak to the church? As part of our development, and the last thing I will share, is that we wanted the church needed to develop what we call the Historic Parcel Church Foundation Board of Neighbors. And so we have a board that we are developing this coming October that will be consisting of nothing but neighbors. And the neighbors will have a handle, and they will also have part management of the historic preservation of the building. And we'll be working with the church so that that begins the conversation and continuing the conversation and having the neighborhood meet with us and conversate with us about the needs of the community, helping the church to meet those needs at the same time. Here ends my third dissertation defense.
Thank you so much. Marlowe might be wondering why he went first, but it's pretty clear to all of us why he went first, because he excited us, right? Because he made us feel the need for fighting poverty and the state of inner cities. Very good. I'm sure that there are questions, so it's time for questions. Esau.
Very good job, Father. I really enjoyed that. It's very helpful. I was wondering, when you talked about the church being historically missional, were you referring back to the early...
the early church.
I'm talking about with... did you have any data about how... Is it Marcel's?
Parcells.
Parcells. Do you have any ideas about how they initially engaged the community when the church was first founded?
Yes.
And they were closer to the model?
Yes, they were. And the church is a 22,000 square foot building. It is huge. They have everything. They were the neighborhood hub. They had the gym. They had the educational wings. They had everything. There was no such thing back in 1919 of community centers. So the church was the hub of the community. And so that's where so we're returning back. And then one of the things we noticed was that the church, that particular church, was an advocate of the needs of the community. And so that became an important issue for us, was that we had to return back to advocacy. And in the ways in which to get people out of poverty is to present and to be about the business of advocating and assisting them in doing that. That's what helped me. When I got out of poverty, remember what I said, it was the church and education. And it wasn't always a check, but it was always advocacy.
Thank you. Another question. Yes, sorry, Gary, and then Steve.
Where'd you get the money?
Gary?
Where did you get the money to give away refrigerators and things like that?
That's a very good question. Because of the church and my relationship throughout the city, we had tons of donations and corporate sponsorship.
Well, would you say more about the board of neighbors? I'd love to hear more about, do you require them to be members of the church?
No, we don't want them to be members of the church in that regard. Right. What we're trying to do, and this is a bold move we're doing, very, very risky, but we're doing it. We want to create a conversation in order to know how to meet the needs. Half of the church don't live in that community. So the only way we can feed that information to us is to bring in the neighborhood to sit with us on a consistent basis. And so the way in which we're doing it is to create the board of neighbors where they have a parcel or be part of the process of parcel, particularly in the development of that historic building. So through that, we will recreate the gym. We will recreate the building and turn the building into a community center as well as a church center. Well, we're not clear on that yet, but we're looking like 12, 13, something like that.
Yes.
Dr. Hines.
Was the demise of that original congregation completely due to white flight, or were there other factors?
There were other factors, but that was the main issue. It was a white flight as the main factor, but then there were other issues, that was related to the Parcel Avenue Baptist Church. And the neighborhood changed radically, very, very fast. And so all of that was a compound issue.
Thank you. Alma?
Church and state play a role in that,
In terms of?
as far as decision making or receiving funding or?
No. In fact, the city of Rochester was also instrumental with us in helping us, to close the street and do all kinds of other things.
Daryl?
When you were looking at the demographics of the neighborhood, what material did you look at?
We looked at the data, the census, U.S. Census. We looked at other information that's coming from the city of Rochester itself, through their Department of Business Development and through their department in that regards, chiefly those two.
What would be the
prospects of engaging with other churches and parishes in that vicinity, or do you all plan to just continue this to be your own hub to work with and develop your division?
Oh, we welcome that to work with everybody, and we have a very good working relationship with the other area churches within Beechwood. So that it's open.
Any other questions?
Any advice for other, but small, city congregations who may not have the resources to do exactly what, in your situation, is being done for us to do better, how can the churches better engage the neighborhood?
You saying small congregation that's also in the city?
Yeah.
Do it. Let me tell you what we did. The building is big, but the congregation is small. My membership is about 200, so we see half of that really. We have faith. And we also believe that because of that, that we can, that scripture, I can do all things in Christ. And we kept invoking that to do it because we needed to prove something and we needed to return back to being that parish. So it was really an issue, not for the community, but it was an issue of our own faith to get the congregation to believe in itself that we can do this. Once we started meeting with different people in the community, in the city, and they started giving us a hand in terms of resources and money and all that kind of good stuff, it just took flight thereafter. So good prayer, and take the step and be bold about it and do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please give them